Hey, thank you. So I'm presenting SAS Viya Forge, which is a new project out of SAS. And the idea behind Viya Forge is to offer a sort of self-service repository for all kinds of information that you might need to, well, basically get value out of your Viya deployments. I've got a little agenda, so I'll do a short introduction of myself. I'll give you an overview of the SAS Viya Forge project. We'll compare Viya Forge to some other sources that you might know already exist from SAS. And then we'll talk about the different types of content that we will be servicing through Viya Forge. I'll do a short demo of the site as it is right now. And then we talk about how you can potentially contribute to the content on Viya Forge as well. And at the end, there's some time for Q&A. Like I said, my name is Jan Stienstra. I live in Reeuwijk in the Netherlands, which I always say is a small town in a small country. I've been in the Applied Architecture and Technology group within SAS for about 1.5 years now. And that's basically a group that works with our customers, well, basically with the same goal as Viya Forge actually, is to make sure that our customers get the value out of the software that they're basically getting from us. So we work with customers on topics like architecture, but also looking at whether maybe they need some new features within the software, and then we basically are sort of a bridge between the customer and our R&D department. I've been with SAS for about 14 years, started out with consulting, moved over to customer advisory, and then indeed, so 1.5 years I switched to R&D within this AAT team. And I studied computer science at the University of Amsterdam, so I have a background in high-performance computing. So the Viya Forge project. This is a project that started out from the leadership within R&D because they basically realized that if SAS needed to touch every customer continuously on their journey with enabling SAS Viya, that probably wouldn't scale. There's a lot of us within SAS, but there are a lot more customers out there. So we need to have a mechanism to basically get you the value out of the software without us having to, well, basically hold your hand all of the time. So the idea is to offer a self-service portal that will allow you to basically get to that information yourself. The idea is to have it be community-driven. So that basically means that not only does SAS provide input to this portal, but we also like to invite our partners and also potentially our customers to do the same. And so at the end, the idea is that we have a portal that allows sharing knowledge between all of those parties and basically getting the knowledge that we gain in the field back to our customers and our partners as well. And so how do we do that? Well, the idea is we offer reference architectures, best practices and guides on all different kinds of topics, mainly first related to architecture, but then also moving into more functional domains later on. There should be an easy search for content that is applicable to you, and I'll show you a bit later on how that works. And of course, it should be easy to contribute actually to Viya Forge itself. So we've spent some time in thinking about, okay, how can we make this process hopefully as smooth as possible for everyone. Now, you might think, okay, but there is already quite a lot of information out there from SAS, and of course there is. The most obvious one is, of course, our reference documentation that you can reference for information regarding your Viya deployment. But reference documentation I always see is sort of product-based documentation and really task-based documentation. So that's really if you want to have, or you have a particular task that you want to perform, or you have a particular product that you work with, you basically look up, okay, how can I do this? So if I have a particular procedure that I need to run, okay, what are all the options that are out there? So that's a sort of a smaller scoped piece of documentation in that sense. Now we also, of course, have SAS communities. SAS communities is how I describe it, is more scenario based. So the posts that you will see on SAS communities will basically give you sort of an A to Z guide through a particular scenario that you might be working on. And it is often focused on sort of new developments. So if there's a new product out there or a new functionality within the software, on communities you often see posts about this topic. And of course, an important part of communities as well, a sort of a Q&A function, so people can ask questions and have other people answer those questions. So there's definitely a place for such communities still. And then the third one, of course, SAS training. And that's really more if you're looking into getting more information or more skills-based information or more topic-based information. So that's if you're looking for a bit more broader content related to particular topics that you might be interested in, or skills that you want to gather. And it does not really constrict itself to just SAS software. It can also go into topics that may extend beyond just the SAS software. So more general topics like, okay, how do I actually work with, well, AI, for instance, in a reasonable way? And that is just more than just talking about SAS. And then finally, we arrive at SAS Viya Forge. And our idea behind this is that topics that we cover within Viya Forge, or content that we cover there, should be target state based. And what I mean with that is that all of the content that we service through Viya Forge, it has a description at the top saying, okay, this is basically the scenario or the target state that you want to achieve. And the document then describes how you get there. And that depends on how we do that based on the type of content that we service. And I will show you in a bit what the different types of content are. And one of the things that we found when we thought about, okay, what is let's say the added value of this kind of portal, is that we thought it has to be versioned and evolving. And so what I mean with that is that what you often see, for instance, on communities is that a post is written about a particular topic, but then later on, a couple of years later, you look at that article and say, okay, is this still applicable to me right now? And so it was written when, for instance, Viya 2021.3 was out. We're now at 2026.04. Is the content that is there, is that still applicable to me? And the idea behind Viya Forge is that every piece of content is actually tagged, and you can see, okay, this content is at least applicable from this version. And if there is a reason to say, okay, it is not applicable anymore, there will also be a tag that basically says, okay, this is the final version for which this piece of content is applicable. So that's basically how it differentiates from the other pieces of content that we already have. Now, what kind of content can you expect? The first thing is reference architectures. And reference architectures, in our view, is sort of a quite concise document that basically describes the most optimal target state for a particular requirement. So for instance, think about a reference architecture that describes how can you implement, for instance, Viya on multiple availability zones within Azure, for instance. And then the reference architecture just describes, okay, these are the components that you need to think about, and these are the reasons why these components matter in this particular architecture. And then from reference architectures, we sort of get into guides, and guides are a bit longer form documents, and they describe a sort of a sequence of steps that you can go through. So for instance, we have things like a deployment guide, which talks about, okay, I have this reference architecture for multi-AZ deployments. Now, how do I deploy actually an environment in such a way that it meets that reference architecture? So that basically goes back to an A to Z document giving you exactly those steps that you require. We also have things like operating guides. So once you have deployed the environment, you still need to maintain that environment in such a way that that you get the value out of the software for the longest amount of time. So that, for instance, talks about, okay, if I have such an environment with multiple availability zones, are there particular topics that I need to think about when I maintain this environment? And when I back the environment up or when I restore the environment, are there things that I need to think about in this particular scenario? So that is what is described in for instance, those operating guides. And then finally, we have best practices, and those are similar to what you will find on communities. So it describes a short amount of steps to do a particular thing within Viya, and that can range from an implementation task to actually a piece of functional software that you can develop within Viya, and it describes, okay, how do I get there in the easiest way possible. And so those are the three main types of content that we service through Viya Forge. But in addition, we also have tools that we make available. We are working on delivering these on Viya Forge, so some of them are not at this moment available, but they are in the works. And the first one is SAS Viya Tuning. And that is a repository that was developed within my team to basically allow you to tune your Viya environment based on the requirements that you have. So for instance, we divide this repository into different scenarios. So if you, for instance, have a lot of VA users or VA report viewers, there's a particular set of tunings that we recommend for that kind of scenario. So that is what we captured in the SAS Viya tuning repository. Then there is SAS validation scenarios, and that is a collection of both tooling and scenarios that allows you to test your Viya environment. So we use Playwright to define testing scenarios for your Viya environment, and then we use Locust to execute those tests. And that can allow you to both just validate whether your environment is working as expected. So basically just logging into the environment, starting a compute session, see whether you can start a CAS server from there, and sort of validate your environment. But it can also be used to do performance-based testing. So spin up multiple sessions at the same time and see how the response time evolves when you increase the number of sessions. Thirdly, SAS usage utilities. That's a rather small repository at the moment, but it's basically a collection of scripts that we've developed to get information about the usage of your Viya environment. And we base that on the auditing information that the Viya environment gathers automatically. And those scripts basically just extract that information from the audit API that is already available and gathers a number of interesting facts about your environment in a more sort of easily consumable way. So for instance, it tells you, okay, these are the amount of users that have logged in over the past week, over the past month. So you can sort of see that development over time. It will tell you, okay, how many compute sessions were started, what is the maximum number of concurrent sessions that were running on this system. So it gives you sort of a high-level overview of the utilization of your environment. And then the last thing is Viya Cuddle or Viya CTL. And that is a tool that allows you to control the configuration within your Viya environment. And especially if you have multiple environments to maintain, this tool helps you to maintain the configuration in a consistent way. So this tool takes an input file that describes all the configuration parameters in your environment and then applies it to that environment. The tool was initially called the Viya Overwriter because it just brutally overwrites everything that is in your environment. And the idea came about because we saw that customers sort of struggled with getting consistent configuration in their environments, and just having a tool that just overwrites it whenever there is a deviation from the standard proved to be very useful. So that's a tool that is shortly made public as well. So how does it look like? We'll switch to the actual site. There we go. So this is the landing page of Viya Forge when you first visit it. You'll see here that there is a, get my cursor out there. Is it there? Oh, there it is. So here there's a button to find content, and it goes to the search screen, which I'll show you in a moment. And here at the bottom you see those four main kinds of content that I talked about. So if I, for instance, go to reference architectures, you'll see that the actual content here is rather limited, but we basically have been focusing on getting the whole infrastructure set up correctly. And we have some example documents currently published. So, for instance, I talked about the SAS Viya multi-availability zone deployments. So I can click here, and you'll see this, what I talked about, so that you will see the latest version here, and you'll see the tags here at the top. And so, for instance, says that this particular version, it is valid starting from 2025.10. And then if I go to the previous version, you'll see right here that this one actually ended at 2025-09. So between 09 and 10, there was a change in the way that we handle multi-tenancy or multi-availability zone deployments. And so the guide was updated to basically reflect that. And so these tags allow you to search for that information. And well, like I said, the reference architecture is a short document that basically just goes through all of the components that you need to think about. So for instance, it talks about node pools in this case and the storage layer underneath that. But at the bottom, you'll then find additional resources. And so from here, you can actually get to the deployment guide that matches this reference architecture. So this deployment guide basically takes the reference architecture that you saw previously and gives you all the steps that you need to execute to get that to get into that state, basically. And if I scroll all the way at the bottom, we then get to the operating guide. And like I said, that basically explains you, okay, are there specific circumstances that I need to think about when I operate such an environment? So that's basically how all of those documents are linked together. Here at the top, you'll see a search field. So that allows you to basically view all the content that is applicable to your situation. So we have a number of filters here. So for instance, if I say, okay, I want to find a guide, and I am on, let's say, AWS, and my version is, well, the latest that we have here. It will basically say, okay, these are then the guides that are applicable to your situation. So this is how you can view all of those guides that are applicable to you. And then here at the top, we also have pathways, and those are basically sort of the overview of all of those documents linked together and say, okay, these are sort of scenarios that you can work through from design all the way to operating that environment. I think I'll go to the contributing section here. So this is the contributing page, and that basically shows you, okay, these are the instructions that you need to follow if you want to contribute content back into Viya Forge. We made it hopefully as easy as possible. So all of the content that is in Viya Forge is basically just markdown files. And we have created a set of scripts that you can run. It will generate all the template files for you. So basically you just need to fill in those template files. And then via a Git submission process, you can open a pull request, and we'll review the content and allow you to contribute back into Viya Forge. I'll try to switch back to my slides. There we go. So yeah, contributing is basically open for all of these categories. So for reference architectures, for guides, and for best practices. At this moment, the tooling is something that we provide from SAS. And we're working on also getting things like sizing information out there. So there's a sizing team within SAS that looks at, okay, what is the particular infrastructure that you need for your VIA environments. And that is currently those benchmarks are sometimes published, but they're more marketing material. And we actually want to incorporate that into the Viya Forge as well. Then I have a brief outlook to the future. So what are we currently still working on? Well, the most important thing is to integrate Viya Forge in the rest of the SAS content framework. So basically, we integrate links from, for instance, our reference documentation to Viya Forge and vice versa. So for instance, if you read about multi-AZ deployments, there is a section about multi-AZ deployments in the reference architecture, describing what you need to do in that situations, and we want to integrate the documents that we provide back into the reference documentation. We're working with our natural language processing group to make chat available. So that basically means that if you use the AI interfaces within the SAS products, it will not only reference the reference documentation, but actually also take into account the information that is available on Viya Forge as well, to basically answer the questions that you asked there. And of course, grow content. So like I said, the current set of content is basically sort of a demo of what the structure of the site will look like, and it's basically sourced from within SAS. And so I've been speaking with lots of groups of people and trying to create some enthusiasm to contribute back into Viya Forge. So that's definitely something that we'll be focusing on in the future. And I think with that, I have some time for questions, if there are.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Tools provided from SAS, are there in the future also ways that customers can integrate their tools in this SAS Forge, that they will evaluate by SAS and then be contributed to the offer?
Yeah, in theory that. In theory, no. Well, you can probably hear me, but again, yeah. Does it work? Hello. Yeah, indeed. So, is this okay? Yeah. So in theory, there is nothing stopping us from getting that contribution from you into Viya Forge. It's just the way that it's currently set up is that every tool is in itself a open source project. So what we currently work through is when we have a tool that we want to make available, there are some checks that need to happen to basically say, okay, are we basically allowed to make this an open source contribution? But in theory, if you would go through that process and determine yourself that a tool that you create can be published externally, yeah, then certainly, and we can just basically provide a link to your repository. So that's certainly a possibility, yeah. Yeah, I'll run.
Are you with this product and this idea also trying to target other audiences than the current documentation does? For instance, architects or like administrators or users, or what's your primary target audience?
Yeah, so the idea is indeed that there is a broad scope of the types of users that should find this content valuable, but that will basically depend on the type of document that you're talking about. So for instance, the idea with the reference architectures is that it is quite high level. So we'll basically just talk about, okay, what do you need to get this particular requirement set up? So that's more targeted indeed at architects thinking about, okay, what do I need to do when I want to deploy my VIA environment? And then other types of guides, like the deployment guides or implementation guides, are more targeted at actual administrators or deployment specialists. We actually had a new team member very recently who came from the solutions division within SAS. So I'm working with him to also see whether we can incorporate also documentation on our solutions. And that will be more, I would say, end user focused compared to what we currently have within the Viya Forge. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Any more? Yeah.
Probably a simple one for you. Where did the name Forge come from? What's the inspiration behind that?
Yes.
And the second thing is you're getting the material from, you said, industry partners, and how do you curate that to make sure it's, to ensure the integrity?
Yes. So first, the first question, so where does the name come from? I'll be perfectly honest, we had a different name first. We actually wanted to call it Value Forge. And then we went through that whole process of making this externally accessible. And then legal said, no, there's a pending trademark for Value Forge. So unfortunately, you can't use that. So actually, then we were thinking, okay, what can we do? And then we basically said, well, we own the trademark for Viya, so no one can basically get that one. And so we decided to call it Viya Forge. The name Forge is sort of a general term for a repository. And you basically see it in, for instance, a GitLab is often also called a forge. So a forge is a general term for a contribution-based environment. Your second question, okay, how do we curate those documents? So the current process is that when there is a contribution, basically there are one or two members within my team that do sort of initial scan and see, okay, who will actually need to look at this, because that will really depend on the type of content that is being contributed. So, like I said, if it is a solution-based document, we'll need to talk to the solution guys to basically validate what is written here. That's basically the initial contribution. And then we have the challenge, of course, is how can we make sure that this content keeps up to date? And that's what we have been looking into, basically using our co-pilots as well. It's basically saying, okay, I want to run every time we release new software. So basically every month we release a new version of Viya, have it look at the reference documentation, for instance, the what's new information that is in there, and basically see, okay, are there any changes that can be expected for our documents that are currently live? That's sort of a best effort approach from our end. And then, of course, there is the possibility that if you or someone else sees that the document is actually not correct, yeah, there is the contribution process back saying or highlight an issue to us, and then we'll look at it. That's basically mainly a good bridge. On the Viya Forge site, there's a link to the GitHub repository. And using the issues feature in GitHub, you can also request new content. So if you have a particular kind of guide or a reference architecture that you think is very valuable, you can open an issue. There's an issue template specifically for new document requests. And so you can make sure that we know about it. And that's sort of a trigger for us to prioritize that content if lots of people ask for it. Yep.
Following up on that, so if there is a request, how do you open it up to the public? Is there a platform to see that?
Yes. Yeah, so the I can maybe just show you. So that's just a feature that is part of GitHub, so GitHub issues, and it will, yeah, go back here. So if I, it's a bit difficult difficult for me to see, but I think I'm hitting it right. Yeah. So here we get into the GitHub site, and then here under issues, you can actually create a new issue. Oh, and then I need to log in. Well, so you can create a new issue, and basically it will just show up in a list. What we will do is we have an internal version of this site as well, where we basically have the documentation that is pending approval. And so the issue that you enter here will also be entered there. And so also the internal people looking at that can see, okay, this is a feature that was requested by one of our customers. We have a whole list of documents that we are currently working on. So they are listed as issues in our internal site. But then we have, let's say, a special category with a label saying, okay, this is actually a customer request, not something that we just came up with ourselves.
That's all the time we have for questions, but I'm sure Jan will hang out for a minute afterwards if there are any follow-up questions. All right, let's give him a round of applause. Great job.